Hello, everybody. I hope you're all staying safe and well. Safe and well. Safe and well. Today I did order you all. Today we are doing our reading wrap up for September. So I have my September reads here. I'm wearing my reading is my favorite sports crew neck. Feeling nice and cozy. And yeah, we can get into it. I think I'm gonna do soft speaking in this video instead of whispering. So if you like soft speaking, it's your lucky day. And if you prefer whispering, well, 99% of my videos are whispering, so you can watch one of those. But yeah, to start off, the first spooky season read of the season that I've completed in September is This Ravenous Fate by Haley Dennings. This Ravenous Fate. Flowers and the jewels and the blood on the cover. As I've said before, this was a childhood friends to enemies to lovers book. It's the first book in a series by this author, and the book is divided into 1, 2, 3 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. And I enjoyed this book. I think the middle portion of it was slow. The first fifth of it was really interesting, the intro to the storyline, and then the last fifth of it I really enjoyed. I feel like so much plot happened in the last fifth of the book that really made me think about it and has made me think about it since I finished the book. But I think the middle portion did feel long, and I didn't particularly feel the desire to pick it back up much during the middle portion. So yeah, I did enjoy the story, but I wanted more tension and whatnot between the two main characters. In the end, we did get that, but I wanted more, I guess, throughout the story. And Elise, this follows Layla and Elise, who are the childhood friends to enemies to lovers. And I mean, we barely got lovers at the end, but I like a slow burn, so that's not really a problem for me. But I felt like Elise as a character just annoyed me. I didn't particularly care for her. Yeah, I was just kind of annoyed by her. I felt like she was quite blind to what was going on at times. Layla I liked because she was a lot spunkier. Of course, Layla was blind to things at times too, but I just liked her and her spunkiness, whereas Elise, I was annoyed by how blind she was to her father's grossness. And yeah, I don't know, Sterling, I don't know, I didn't like Sterling either. Like, I liked him in the beginning, and then once he was like a suck up, I was like, okay, whatever. There's a big thing of like politics of like the vampires versus the vampires who are the reapers versus the non-reapers in this book. That was kind of interesting. I just don't feel like I was super into it though. Like, it was kind of giving Marvel, like, there's this villainous theme of like some people want to turn reapers into like superhumans and use them to fight, and I feel like I've just seen that storyline so much before with like Marvel and stuff that unfortunately I was kind of like, okay, like but yeah, there's like a bunch of like creepy, powerful, rich dudes. There were some beautiful quotes sprinkled throughout it with Layla and Elise talking about their sort of tense feelings for each other. Jamie, one of the like Gain Lords that Layla's vampire group was working with, he was cool, he was funny. And yeah, I don't know, that was this Ravenous fate. So I'm glad I read it. I'll plan on reading like the other books once the other books in the series come out. Like I said, the last fifth of the book, a lot did happen plot-wise, and several plot twists in a short period of time that were very interesting. So I knew something was up, but I didn't know exactly what. Like the one plot twist, yes, I guessed, but then the others, like I was like, oh, I didn't think it was gonna be that. But so I will plan on reading the other books when they come out. And I am glad that I read this to get me more into spooky season gear. But yeah, that was this Ravenous fate. There was also a lot of like vampire stuff, obviously, since it's a vampire book, and I don't particularly love when they start talking about like the blood and stuff in vampire books. Like, that's not really my thing. Like, I'm reading Twilight right now, and I'm like 120 pages in, and we haven't gotten into that yet, but I know in Midnight Sun it did touch on that, but in this it's like a lot. So for those scenes I did skim those because I'm like grossed out by that. But yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind. And yeah, the author, I saw on her Instagram, she said she uses cannibalism as a metaphor for love in this book, but I don't think I really got it. Like, I think maybe because the subject just makes me squeamish, but yeah. And then after that, I finished It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Obviously this is a controversial book, but I did watch the movie when it came out, so I wanted to read the book to compare. I had conflicting feelings about the movie, which I talked about in a previous video, and honestly I have conflicting feelings about the book too. I know people usually either love or hate this book and feel very strongly either way, but I think I do fall somewhere in the middle. So things I liked and things I didn't like. I liked when it talked about Atlas and about how when he turned 18, his mother kicked him out. He was still in high school, still a senior in high school, but he got into a fight with his mother's boyfriend who was abusing his mother. Then his mother wouldn't take him back in. So then he was left out in the streets, since he was 18, he no longer qualified for like foster care. And it kind of just showed how easy it is for people to become homeless in the States, to just be born into, you know, a family with issues. And for something like that to happen, to still be a kid, a teenager in high school, to turn 18 and your parent to choose an abusive partner over you, and then to be stuck basically. So in his case, he joined the military, and that was kind of his ticket to housing. But yeah, I thought that being explored and touched on was done well, because I wish there was more awareness about that. And I think that in our society, people think they're so far away from something like that, that couldn't be them and could never happen to them and whatever. And I don't think people realize how not far away they are from being homeless. Like, it only takes not having support and then a few bad things to happen in a row. So I thought that was done well. I really enjoyed her mother's talk with her towards the very end of the book, where she tells her mom about the abuse and about what happened with Ryle. And she thinks her mother is going to sweep it under the rug and tell her, like, oh, stuff happens in marriage sometimes, like, what can you do? Because her mother was in an abusive relationship with her father, and her mother never left. So she thinks her mother is going to kind of encourage her to go back. And instead, her mother basically tells her the opposite. And I thought that section was really good. Let me see if I can find it. Because I really thought that was good. But yeah, oh my gosh, where is it? Where in the world is it? Okay, here it is. She says, I know exactly what you mean, Lily, but the last thing you want to do is lose sight of your limit. Please don't allow that to happen. I have no idea what she means by that. She sees the confusion in my expression, so she squeezes my arm and explains in more detail. We all have a limit, what we're willing to put up with before we break. When I married your father, I knew exactly what my limit was. But slowly, with every incident, my limit was pushed a little more and a little more. The first time your father hit me, he was immediately sorry. He swore it would never happen again. The second time he hit me, he was even more sorry. The third time it happened, it was more than a hit. It was a beating. And every single time I took him back. But the fourth time, it was only a slap. Only. And when that happened, I felt relieved. I remember thinking, at least he didn't beat me this time. That wasn't so bad. She brings the napkin up to her eyes and says, every incident chips away at your limit. Every time you choose to stay, it makes the next time that much harder to leave. Eventually, you lose sight of your limit altogether because you start to think, I've lasted 5 years. What's 5 more? So I thought that was a really powerful discussion and really on the nose. So I really appreciated that, because that's so true. When you're in like an abusive relationship, once you've experienced some things and chosen to stay past certain things, then it's like when they do something abusive again, but it's not as bad as what they did maybe last time, you're like, oh, progress, they're not so bad. But it's like, no, baby, they are bad. They're just didn't do as atrocious of a thing this time. They still did an atrocious thing, just not as atrocious. Like, no, that's not good. That's not progress. That's still bad. It's just not as bad. So I really appreciated the dialogue there. And like when she gives the little speech about like what would you say to your daughter, that was also in the movie. I teared up at that point again too. I don't know what it is about that particular quotes, but when she does that thing about like what would you tell your daughter if she comes to you and tells you someone's hitting her, pushing her down the flight of stairs, like forcing themselves on her, but they tell them they love her. Like that part in both the movie and in the book made me tear up. So I thought that was all good. What I didn't like that he that she let him back in the place to like help with the rest of her pregnancy. I didn't like that he was like putting together the crib and stuff. Like in the movie they switched it and her mother helped her put together the crib, and I preferred that to him putting together the crib and stuff. I don't necessarily know if I can be like, oh, like that's romanticizing whatever, because I know in real life sometimes abusers are like that. Like they do these terrible things, but then they do really sweet things, and it makes you second guess, like, are they really that bad? So I don't think I can criticize her all the way for writing that in and say she's like romanticizing stuff, because I know that is the main critique a lot of people have with this book, is that she could be romanticizing abuse. So I don't think I can fully say that she is, though, because I know in real life sometimes abusers do those really sweet things and makes you second guess the really bad things they did. So I didn't like seeing it in the book because I feel like it messes with your head as the reader, just as it would mess with Lily's head in the moment. But I think that's kind of the point. And yeah, I liked that Lily didn't say anything nice about her father's funeral, and at her father's funeral, and that was her standing up for her mom, and that her mom is like, oh, like in that moment you stood up for me more than I ever stood up for myself. I don't think we got that in the movie. In the movie, one thing I didn't like was then at the end when she went and visited her father's grave, and her mom was like, oh, I'm proud of you for like forgiving her father, basically. Like, I didn't like that because I was like, why? Like, why does her story have to be about her learning to accept and be okay with her dad beating the shit out of her mom? Like, I didn't like that in the movie. But in the book, I liked that her mom was like, I know you stood up for me when you said you couldn't say a nice thing about that man, even at his funeral. Like, I liked that. So, yeah, other things I didn't like. I didn't like the letters to Ellen. Like, there would be just full chapters that were just letters to Ellen. And I know it was like a quirky way to go back in time to show what happened with her and Atlas instead of just having a time jump. But I would have rather just taken the time jump. Like, the letters to Ellen just seemed weird. And I was just like, okay, I wasn't here for it. I didn't really care for Atlas either, to be honest. Like, Atlas gives me red flags too. Like, I feel like he's a little aggressive too in the way he like freaked out on Ryle the first day and yells at his friends, and like Atlas just like, I'm not totally convinced that Atlas is this great guy. And I don't really like how Atlas is kind of almost painted like this like savior who's like coming in and helping her. Like, yes, she chose to leave on her own, but Atlas was framed as like an important part of that still, and I don't think he needed to have that much of a role with it, honestly. Yeah. One of my critiques with the movie was that like it hadn't been really clear in a lot of the scenes what happened. In the book, I see it's because she's like confused and gaslit in the moment, and then it becomes clear, like, yes, he pushed you, like, yes, da 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 da. So I wish in the movie they would have like shot it through how she saw things, but then flipped to like the scene playing out like clearly, so we could have seen that point of view wise. But yeah, I still don't like the way this book is marketed, as far as sometimes the person who loves you the most is the one who hurts you the most, because I don't agree with that. I don't believe that that's love, and I don't think that that's a good message to have. But I did enjoy the book. And yeah, what else? I feel like there were a few other things I wanted to touch on. Oh, I do think Ryle was showing red flags, like from the beginning, like when he went out on the thing when they weren't even together, and he asked everyone to like excuse themselves, and she's like, no, you don't need to leave, and he's like, yeah, like leave. Or like when they were supposed to drive somewhere separate, and then he was like, I'm driving with you, like da da da. Like he never really took into account her input whenever she said something. So I think that was a red flag. Obviously him literally kicking a chair a bunch the first time they met was a huge red flag. Him smashing a wine glass like the first time they saw each other at a party, big red flag. So I think there were a lot of red flags that show kind of that there are things to look out for, and things that you may think are small initially, a lot of times are testaments to people's character and are testaments to possibly bigger issues. Oh, and then another thing, I know a lot of people say they find Lily insufferable and annoying and whatever. I personally don't. I don't really have a problem with her. Was she a little annoying at times? Sure. But I think that's part of the point of this book too. I think part of the point is, you see in this book when she talks about like, oh, I was wrong to keep the magnet my ex gave me, like, so I was in the wrong too. You see her gaslighting herself, and you as the reader can get gaslit along with that, to think like, yeah, she kept the magnet, yeah, she still has a crush on this old guy, yeah, yada yada yada. But then later in the book, when she kind of finally is like, no, this isn't okay, she tells him, even if I had cheated, even if I had been in bed with another dude, that still wouldn't have given you the right to force yourself onto me, to push me down a flight of stairs, to, you know, do all this stuff. And I think that's like the main point, is you don't need to be, and women don't need to be, and people in general don't need to be perfect people to not deserve someone to force themselves on them, to push them down a flight of stairs, to hurt them physically, sexually, you know, all that. Like, people don't need to be perfect angels to not deserve a terrible crime to be done to their body. And I think that's like one of the main points of this book. Like, for some reason in society, women especially are held to this high standard, and it's like, well, why didn't she leave? And if she does leave, it's like, well, she wasn't perfect in the relationship either. And it's like, that's not the point. Not being perfect, being human, being annoying, being like, none of that accounts for someone to put their hands on you, to abuse you, to assault you. Like, none of that excuses that, point blank, period. So I think that's one of the main things from this book too. We don't need people to be perfect to not deserve abuse. And so yeah, overall I did like the book, and I think it raises some important questions, but at the same time I don't like that she never put in like a report, a restraining order or something for Ryle. Like, I know, again, that's pretty realistic a lot of times, like it's such a thing just to leave, but knowing Ryle's like this special surgeon and thing, and like even her saying like, don't take me to the hospital he's at, I don't want to ruin his reputation. Like, okay, but now the next girl he dates, you know, there's no record of his behavior for someone to know, basically, to look out. Obviously he needs to take account for his own behavior, but having record of that would also help keep him accountable, so that if something happens again, there's record of him having a history of that already. So I didn't like that in the end it was just like, well, you can be a great father, but just our relationship needs to end because of the abuse. Because I'm like, okay, yes, that can be true. Like in the book, there's an author's note at the end where she talks about how her father threw a TV at her mother, and that was one of the first memories she has, but he was never abusive with her. And so, like, yes, that can be true. People can be abusive to their spouses and then never be abusive to their children. However, like, I feel like you still want there to be like record of, you know, something like that, so that, you know, if something happens again, there's record, basically, so it's not just a continuous thing and him never being held accountable, I guess. So yeah, that's my other critique with the book. But overall I did enjoy it, and I am glad I read it, and I don't think it's as terrible. I don't think it's the, like, I don't know, terrible, completely terrible messaging that people say it is. I think it had some good messaging and some questionable messaging, basically. So yeah, that was It Ends With Us. Next we have Delilah Green Doesn't Care, moving into much lighter material. This is a sapphic story following Delilah and Claire. Claire is a single mother. She's bisexual and her ex is kind of in her life. They're obviously co-parenting, but they have like gone back and forth in the past. And Delilah's a free spirit, edgy, all that. She was not popular in school. She thought her stepsister and her stepfamily hated her, and Claire is her stepsister's friend. There's this big plot around her stepsister getting married and finding Delilah, and Claire and all of her other friends hating Delilah's stepsister's husband. He's basically a big prick. They come into this plot to get them to break up, and along the way Claire and Delilah have this chemistry. Originally Delilah's like, oh, it would be so fun to make my stepsister mad by hooking up with her friend, tee hee ha ha. Then she develops real feelings for her, etc., etc. She also meets Claire's daughter. They get along well as well, and yeah, I enjoyed this book as well. I will say Delilah, I liked her, but she also annoyed me. There's like a gnat in here. Oh my gosh. She also annoyed me because like the whole book she's like whining about how her stepsister never liked her, da da da, and then in all the flashback scenes it's like pretty evident that her stepsister and her friends are trying, but Delilah just does not get it, does not get that they're trying to talk to her and whatnot, and she thinks they just hate her And then looking back, it's like, seriously, girly, like they tried so many times and you were so cold to them. So I felt like she was pretty annoying. But I think also, you know, sometimes that can be the case. Sometimes you think, you know, people don't like you or whatever, and they think the same thing about you. They think you don't like them and whatever. So yeah, it was interesting. Claire and Delilah's chemistry was cute. Claire's daughter was interesting. Kids in books are like hit or miss, but her daughter was interesting and could kind of relate to Delilah, I think. And yeah, Claire's like very uptight. Delilah's very like free spirit, so they're kind of like opposites attracts type trope too. And yeah, so it was interesting. I think it also focused on themes of sisterhood and misunderstanding as well with Delilah and her sister. But yeah, it was cute. I think rom-coms aren't really my favorite genre. I've tried a lot this past summer. I really tried with a handful of rom-coms and I enjoyed them, but I just don't think I'm like a full-blown rom-com girly. I like there to be more of a punch to what I'm reading. And then I also read She Gets the Girl by Allison Derrick and Rachel Lippincott. This again is another sapphic rom-com. And so I saw this book was actually lightly based on these authors' love stories. These authors' love stories with each other, Rachel and Allison's love story together. So this one I liked more than Delilah Green Doesn't Care. They're college freshmen. One of them has a crush on this one girl and the other one's super like kind of popular but has a bad home life. And she is coaching the other one how to get her crushes up, like approval, attention, whatever. And originally they don't like each other, but she's coaching her because she wants to prove to her ex that she can commit because she is bad at commitment, whatever. And then the girl she's coaching, this I read at the beginning of the month, so I don't remember their names. I listened to it on audio. But the girl she's coaching is kind of like, okay, she thinks she's anxious, but it's whatever. But obviously, as she's coaching her to get this other girl's attention, they start to have chemistry with each other. And bada bing, bada boom, the rest is history. So I really liked this one. It was cute, classic trope. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, it was just super cute. The only thing I didn't like was the girl who was getting coached was really close with her mom, and like her mom kept getting involved with everything in the storyline, and I was kind of like, okay, I don't care, like no. So that was the only thing. But when it was the two of them together, left to their chemistry and everything. So yeah, that was She Gets the Girl. And then I read a short story by Abby Jimenez called The Situationship. It follows Maddie around just for this year. And it was okay. I like Maddie. But yeah, I don't know. It's a short story. Not a ton to it. But yeah. So those were my September reads. I've now started Twilight, so I had read like 80 pages of it last year and then put it down. So I picked up where I left off. I've read about 40 pages and I'm really enjoying it. It's very cute. I'm planning on reading A Flicker in the Dark because my work is reading it for a book club this month. And what else? I'm gonna pick back up Midnight Sun to go with Twilight. I want to start reading a Good Girl's Guide to Murder that I have not picked back up, that I'm supposed to be buddy reading with one of my friends. And yeah. So yeah, let me know what you're reading in the comments down below, and I hope to see you next time.